Subramaniam Shankaran from IEEE. Today, we are going to discuss about data management life cycle. Okay, so DML, part of the CISSP, is a part of the asset security domain 2 or CISSP. Okay, the latest edition, okay, which was revised in 2022. So basically, whenever you want to manage the data, you need to know who's going to do what. Okay, roles and responsibilities. Okay, the data owner. Okay, basically, data owner is actually the organization which collects the data from the data subject. Okay, data subject is actually the user. Okay, the customer. Let's say if it's going to be e-commerce company, the e-commerce company collect the name, the email, the address, phone number, etc. Okay, the customer becomes the data subject. The e-commerce company, okay, becomes the controller or the data owner because they are receiving the data from the customer. Okay, obviously we have consent, etc. Okay, so let's not get so deep onto the data protection, GDPR, DPDP, PDPL, PDPA. Okay, not those things. We'll have a separate series or video on the data protection anyway. Now, the organization which collects the data from the data subject is called as a data owner because they own the data that is collected from data subject, and data sharing, dissemination, whatever it is. Okay, it's all up to the data owner. So they control the data that they actually have. So they're actually called the data controller. Okay, so they control the data. They decide how long to retain it. They decide whom to share it. Okay, they're called the process, sub-process, blah blah blah, etc. Okay, because they control the data. The control of the data is based on the instructions or the consent given by the data subject. Okay, so data controller is actually the data owner. They collect the data from the data subject and they have it with them. Okay, now if they're going to give it to a third party, they're called as a processor. That processor is going to give to another third party called sub-processor. We have processor, sub-processor, sub-processor, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's all depending upon the business requirement, all with respect to the consent that has been received from the data subject. Data custodian is basically the IT team, okay, that is maintaining the data. Okay, for example, if the controller is going to have the data custodian, okay, maintains the data. Okay, now the data might be given to a processor or sub-processor, or the data might be given only the access, okay, to the processor, sub-processor. That means the controller will not share the data with the processor, sub-processor. He might give only access to the processor and sub-processor. Okay, giving an access is as equivalent as sharing the information. Physically, it need not move from the controller to a processor, sub-processor. Giving an access is as equivalent as that. Okay, that means the processor needs to have read, write, execute on the data. Whether you're going to give the data to them and they're going to have it on the data, or you're going to allow the read, write, execute, okay, it all immaterial. Okay, moment you give the access to a third party for the data, that is as equivalent as sharing it. So data custodian is actually the IT department which maintains the data. And there's one more role called data steward. Okay, so data steward is from the business. He's not IT guy, but he will tell the IT guy is the data custodian what needs to be done every day, like the operations. Okay, everyday operations, business as usual. Okay, so his data steward is actually from the business, will give the instructions to data custodian. So data processor we discussed. Okay, see the data owner is actually the controller. Processor will receive the data or will receive the access to the data. Okay, and they start processing it. Okay, maybe in case of e-commerce company, the packaging industry who's going to print the bill or print the label address. Okay, and that would be a processor. And the other processor is a company which is going to deliver the goods to the customer. Okay, so process, sub-processor, etc. Users are the individual who are going to access the data, who are like customers are the users in this particular case. Okay, whose data the controller is actually going to have. Now, when you come to a data management lifecycle, data is going to be on different forms. Okay, we'll actually discuss that. Key goals of DLM. Okay, one thing you should always remember, irrespective of whatever we discuss on security, Macombo's cube, John Macombo's cube is what we need to understand. Confidentiality, integrity, availability, physical security, technical security, and then administrative control for the data at rest and data in use and data in transit, with some tweaking here and there, okay, because the physical security, technical security, administrative control is not explicitly mentioned that way, but again, we are actually following it, okay. So the objective of data lifecycle management is also confidentiality, integrity, and availability. From whom you need to secure the data. Okay, so disclosure, alteration, and the destruction. Okay, the exactly opposite of CIA. Identifying the authorized users and also identifying if you are not able to identify the authorized user, that means everybody else, okay, is going to be unauthorized user. Securing the data from unauthorized users with respect to disclosure is confidentiality. With respect to modification is integrity. With respect to destruction is actually the availability. Now, data collection. We are collecting the data or we are creating the data. Okay, we might create the data on the server. If you are collecting the data from the user, okay, there is a data collection. Obviously, before you actually create it or before you collect it, you need to understand who is involved in creating the data or collecting the data. Okay, when you're collecting the data, is it from an authenticated source? Okay, because the purpose limitation principle, all those things will come into the picture. Okay, accuracy is also one of the principles of the data protection. Okay, so the data that you are actually collecting, if it's a mail, email, okay, send them a link for activation. If it's a mobile number, send them an OTP for verification. So the data you are actually collecting, okay, should be perfect. For the address, we cannot do a verification. Okay, let's say the same example of an e-commerce company. But if an IT organization, if the employees are going to give you the passport for address proof, okay, you can ask somebody to go to the house to for the residential verification. There are cases where it is possible. There are cases where it is not possible. What is possible, you have to do it. For example, sending a newsletter, I don't want a residential verification. So it's a purpose limitation is what you need to actually decide. So collecting the data, authenticated source, ensure that the data is available only for the authenticated or authorized users. Okay. Obviously, whenever there's a confidentiality, identification, authentication, authorization, encryption is the sequence in which the confidentiality is encrypted, is implemented, and integrity is implemented by identification, authentication, authorization, and hashing. And availability is based on the last one is actually the backup. Online backup, offline backup, on site, near site, off site, everything is yours. But we need to ensure that whenever the data is lost, there's the mechanism by which we can actually restore it. Okay, data storage, data at rest, where are you actually storing it? Okay, if it's going to be, let's say there is a storage, if it's going to be on the data center, physical security matters to the data center. Okay, and nobody should be in a position to touch the hardware. Intangible operation it should be, unless otherwise there is a hardware failure, okay, etc. If the data is going to be backed up and taken off site, okay, so we need to ensure that the media has got a label, okay, for as an administrative control, and it will be on a turtle box, okay, and for physical security, and the data will be encrypted, okay, for the technical security. So data storage on online, so on-site storage, off-site storage, online storage, all these things needs to be considered. Okay. Now, data maintenance, data will anyway be updated, right? Because we are collecting the data. The customer is changing the residential address, changing the mobile number, changing the email. Okay, so it needs to be maintained. Okay, whenever there's an update that is actually happening, ensure that only authorized person is actually doing it. Okay, and GDPR, okay, paper-based records are also there. Okay, so if the customer has to go to the concerned data controller's office, okay, submit the request, or it can be online where there should be OTP, or you can or they can give the call to the contact center. Again, there'll be a verification. What is your date of birth? Okay, what's your, let's say, date of marriage? If it's single marriage, that's still okay. If it's multiple, then there's a question. Anyway, so what I mean to say is that there is something which is unique to every person, right? Which city you are born, which is your current residential address, something like that. When the data needs to be maintained, okay, the maintenance needs to be done by the appropriate person. Updation from the customer perspective is all actually fine. But when you are actually maintaining the data, okay, what customer cannot modify the data. At most, what they can actually do is they can back it up. Okay, so we discussed on the data storage in the previous slide. Okay, so confidentiality, integrity, and then availability. I'm sorry, integrity and then availability, because I got my certified, CSF professional NIST training actually starting in a few minutes. Authorized users, okay, data usage and sharing. Okay, so usage of the data. Okay, who's using the data must be authorized. For example, the e-commerce company wants to deliver an item that is ordered by the data subject. Okay, they need to fetch the address, they need to fetch the telephone number, they need to fetch the email to send the notification and send the item for send the item. Okay, so and they will actually do it directly, or they will share it with the company which is going to print the address and packaging. Okay, then they will share it with the company which is going to do the delivery. Okay, so data usage and sharing should be done upon the consent, okay, of the data subject. Otherwise, no. Okay, again, role-based access control. Who can actually access it? The updation needs to be done only by authorized person based on service request, or the user can do the updation of their data themselves based on the multi-factor authentication. Okay. Data retention, how long you can hold the data. So GDPR says that you cannot hold the data for more time than what is stipulated. But what is the stipulated time is something which is subjective. See, the patient might join an hospital, okay, and as an, let's say, they might have an inpatient file, okay. So for 30, 40 years, okay, he might be a patient with the same hospital. Regularly, he'll go for a checkup, and doctor exists or not in the hospital is a different thing, but the hospital exists and the patient also exists. So the data retention for this particular patient is not 4 years, 5 years. Okay, national retention policy of 7 years. No, it could be 40 years. But once the patient is deceased, okay, that time you can take a call. Insurance claims and all the settlement, everything is done, and you decide you know more, you need to have the patient record. That time you have to delete it. Delete it from online storage and offline storage, unless otherwise your national regulatory compliance is going to demand retention. Okay. Archival, the data which is not going to be useful any sooner. Okay, you can actually archive it. Ideally, I will not take an example of a personal data, personal or PII, identifiable information. But in case of any other data, the corporate's data, etc., okay, that you are retaining for some time, but you're not going to access it, nobody is going to ask for a restoration, you can move it to an archival. Archival is going to be a storage, physical security is required. Okay, so identification, authentication, authorization, encryption, hashing. Okay, archival is anyway on the availability. Okay, all these things needs to be considered. Security follows the data, privacy follows the personal data. As simple as that. Data destruction. Okay, so when you decide that the data is not required for you, okay, you need to actually destroy that particular data. Now, the destruction of the paper based, then you can go for a shredding. If it's going to be an on hard disk, okay, if it's a traditional environment or server based environment, you can go for alternative current degaussing, DC degaussing, hard disk shredding. Okay, you can go for overwriting. Okay, you can go for zeroization. As long as, okay, it's going to be an HDD. Okay, overwriting and then zeroization is also for the SSD. But if it's for SSD, okay, in particular you have to go for what is called as a ATA secure wipe. Okay, if you're going to ask me, this information is mentioned on Eric Conrad, okay, CISSP study guide. You can take it as a reference. Okay, and then finally, if it's going to be on a cloud, okay, you have to go for what is called the crypto shredding, because the hard disk is also not available for you. That means you cannot pick up the hard disk and go for a shredding. Okay, it is not available for you. And the other one is they don't allow you to delete anything. Okay, you cannot go for zeroization, overwriting, AC degaussing, DC degaussing. Nothing is possible. So only thing that you have to do is to encrypt the data. Okay, with a powerful key. AES 256 is okay. It's very powerful. Okay, I'm not asking you to go for 4096. It takes hell a lot of time for the encryption. AES 128, 192, 256 is absolutely fine. Encrypt the data and delete the key. This is actually called the crypto shredding. Okay, this is going to hold good for your data destruction. Physical papers, you can shred it anyway. CISSP training, if you are interested in joining us for the best of the CISSP training that you can ever have, okay, with a complete 6 days of training, not just 6 days, only for completion of one particular cycle. Join me for continuous training for CISSP and multiple online mock examinations to handhold you until you are certified. My name is Subramaniam Shankaran, MyTripLess. Mail us on training@itriples.org.uk for your next CISP winning schedule, or WhatsApp me on +91 99405 87544. Cheers, sir. Good day. Bye-bye.